beside the fire, my wife's side.
Hello and welcome to Peace Talks, a talk show dedicated to imparting strategies for improving communication. My name is Arden Leigh, and this is our premiere episode. I am here with mental health counselor Kayce Neill, who is a communication expert and a certified high-performance coach. And I'm so excited to introduce her to you today and for us to begin our talks about how to improve our communication with one another. I want to tell you a little bit about why I started this show, since this is our first episode. As everyone in the world knows right now, we are entering a time of civil unrest. Whatever your opinions and your beliefs may be, I think the one thing that we can all agree on is that there are a lot of us out there who are disagreeing on things. And my goal with this show is to help people to be able to communicate peacefully with one another, even throughout disagreements, and particularly when there aren't actually disagreements there. One thing that can happen is when we are in a time of high stress and high tension is we can come home and take those things out on our loved ones. And unfortunately, the anxiety that pervades the air can infiltrate our personal relationships in a way that can slowly erode them over time. And if there is one thing that I believe, it is that our emotional security rests on a foundation of our relationships with our loved ones, that our relationships with our loved ones, our friends, our colleagues are sacred, and that they should be sacred spaces where we can all feel safe with the people that we love and care about and make them feel safe as well. So, without any further ado, this is Kayce Neill.
Hello.
And we're going to start out talking about how we can better improve our communication strategies with each other. So obviously we're in a time right now of a lot of high stress and tension. Have you noticed in your immediate world how this is affecting people communicating around you?
Sure, absolutely. And I think all of you guys out there can probably attest to the same thing. You know, when we're living out of fear, when we're living out of anger, when we're constantly being triggered, which we'll talk about later, speaking from those places within, you know, it's essentially like you're living out of like fight, flight, and freeze, and so you're having the inability to actually logically think about what's going on, and therefore have conversations where, you know, depth can get there. And so there's a lot of people that I'm noticing online, a lot of people kind of in life that are struggling to communicate, especially when differences come up, right? So, you know, we've got a very polarized world right now, or it's appearing that it's polarized. You know, the Republicans here and the Democrats there, and I believe this and I believe that. And what we're missing is this kind of curiosity and fascination with, where did you come up with this belief? Why do you have this belief? You know, and actually thinking like there's more that can be done here, and there's more underneath why I think this and what's going on, and we're missing the inability to delve deeper into that.
That's so true, and I've noticed that in myself too, that the moment I see someone who disagrees with me, I automatically assume that they are denying me my humanity. Oh, if you have a belief about this certain political issue, then that inherently means that you don't respect me as a person, so therefore I don't want to have to talk to you because I don't feel safe. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's not true. Maybe if I had a little more patience around examining that and really looking at where people got their beliefs, maybe we could find some common ground.
Sure, and there's also like, we don't have to be friends with everyone, and we don't, right? So there's the ability to get curious and wonder where people are coming from. And then there are people out there that may be their belief, and it's not going to go anywhere, and they're not going to change, and they actually do believe there's that kind of elitism, or there's, you know, that I am better, you know, than you, or, you know, whatever it is that it came from, and that may never change. And so then that kind of is on you. Do you continue these conversations with this person? It may be that your choice is, okay, well, I'm just going to speak at a different level with them. We can't go deep because we can't go to those beliefs, and that's fine. And so there's a great place of becoming super aware of how am I communicating with this person? Is this person able to hear what I'm saying? Do they even want to hear what I'm saying? And if they don't want to do that kind of stuff, or they don't want to be available for that, that's when you get the freedom to then say, okay, great, I get to decide how deep we go, and it may just mean that our relationship is no more, and I wish you the best.
Yeah.
So
our mutual friend, Neil Strauss, actually once described his friendships and relationships as kind of a set of concentric circles, and that there were people in his life who got to be in the very inner circle, you know, and then there were people who, it's the next one and the next one and the next one, based on their behavior and the way that they treated him, and also, you know, where there was compatibility, where there was that, you know, mutual agreement on things. And it's perfectly fine to have a person in your life that you're keeping on an outer ring because they're just not the right fit for you, and it's totally okay.
Yeah.
But even when we get closer, you know, to the people who are obviously people we care about and our loved ones and our relationships, I've found that going around in this really stressed out, you know, frazzled, you know, just constantly on edge from everything that we're seeing in the news lately, that, you know, that is making us feel unsafe, essentially. For me, you know, I'm a sexual assault survivor. So when, just before the election and then like the 2 weeks beforehand, when there was so much in the news about sexual assault, and some of it vulgar, some of it graphic, and, you know, I was going around in this state where, because I was so reminded of things that had happened to me, just by turning on the television every day, I was snapping at people, I was upset, I was angry, I had fallouts with people who were very close to me. So maybe you can help explain a little bit what goes on in the brain when that happens, so that we can all understand why we're feeling so frazzled and understand where it's coming from and what we can do about it.
Yeah, I will just kind of, as a caveat, I don't know a lot about the brain per se, so I don't want to get anything wrong, but if you think of the brain kind of like this, so this is a brain that's like got your prefrontal cortex, and you've got your limbic, and you've got kind of your reptilian, if you think down here. And so this is like a kind of normal brain. This is like, you're doing great self-care, you're going to sleep, you're eating right, things are going really well. What happens when you get into a state where there's stress, there's fear, there's anger, there's guilt, there's shame, there's anything that has you essentially go into fight, flight, or freeze. What happens is, if you think of a pot that's on the stove, or you think of a kettle that's on the stove and there's too much steam, what happens is the, like, woo, you know, the sound goes off or the lid pops up, and that's what happens when you get triggered. So your prefrontal cortex, which is the ability to think logically, it's your ability to come up with the whys, it's your ability to think like, if I do this, this will happen, suddenly doesn't exist anymore. So it kind of pops up, and now what you've got exposed is you've got these two areas kind of exposed, which is really kind of your basic, like, I've got to get out of here, I've got to get safe, I need to take care of myself so I don't die.
Right, that's really like your basic animal instinct, right? Because we're talking about like the limbic and the reptilian brain, which is essentially, I mean, we evolved to have a prefrontal cortex so that we can have talks like this. Yeah. Essentially, we're back to being animals who are like, it is. Do I run away from you or do I bite you?
Yes, and that's what happens. And so when you get in those moments and you're with somebody, the pressure is so much that you are only thinking of, let's say, the next 5 seconds to like 5 minutes. You're like, how do I get out of here? I'm not feeling safe. The pressure is off. I can't think straight. I have to get out of here. And that looks different from everybody. That's fighting, so aggressive talk, physical fights. You'll see people get into those. You know, disagreements. Again, you're not able to think. So you've got fight, you've got flight. So that's people who just want to run away. They're like, I can't do this. I can't do confrontation. Like, I'm not able to speak. You're just like, I've got to get out of here, and I've got to get out of here now. And that could be like, we're not going to have a relationship anymore too, because I keep getting triggered in that way. So you run away from those. The other one is freeze. And that's like, I don't know how to talk. I don't know how to talk. I don't know how to do anything. I can't move my body. You know, those are the ways that it kind of shows up. There's another one that I heard from Martha Beck, a couple of years ago, and she calls it faint. And what I would also call it is blackout. And so this can often happen when you're like, I actually can't remember what happened, you know, like, and we do see that a lot in like sexual assault survivors.
Right.
Too. So
Dissociative fugues, essentially, where you pretty much leave your experience so that you don't have to process it.
Yeah, that's part of it, and that's definitely a safety mechanism that comes in. And then we know that like any one of these, when they're used and they're used constantly, is what then creates problems within the rest of our lives. And so, you know, we were talking before we came here today, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, about like what are triggers. I mean, we hear that all the time. We hear that word. It's kind of become this little buzzword, and I think we can kind of go into talking about that. So I'm a bit of a geek. I love reading. I love research. I love learning about this stuff. So I thought it would be really important, instead of putting triggers in my own words, found a really great source that kind of describes it, so you guys can really get what a trigger is. Because once you start to understand your triggers and how you go into your fight, flight, and freeze, that self-awareness will allow you to then decrease it. Then you can start to learn, like, what are the coping skills that I can use to get out of there? You know, what are the different things that I can do for myself so that I can do this again with my brain? So my brain can come back to like, okay, I'm back in the moment, I'm back in the present moment, I'm not dying, there's no bear chasing me or like dying, like, I'm okay.
And I'm so glad that we're talking about this too, because as you said, the word trigger in our media lately has, you know, on the one hand, there are the people who are overusing it just to mean like, you're making me angry. It's like, no, that's probably not actually a trigger. I didn't get triggered by the barista at Starbucks writing my name on the cup wrong, you know? And on the other hand, you have people who are like, who are being really aggressive about it. You know, you have the alt-right, the MRAs being like, oh, are you triggered? Are you triggered? You know, which they're just using that word to mean like, I want to get a reaction out of you, I want to make you angry or whatever. And so one of the things that makes me so mad about that is that our language is so precious around this, you know? And when they take that word and they make it mean a million different things, it comes to mean nothing at all. It's kind of like how for a while, like, you know, people who had a gluten allergy were like, I have a gluten allergy. And then everyone was like, I have a gluten allergy. Everyone has a gluten allergy too. Well, no, you just decided to cut gluten out of your diet. You know, maybe you don't actually have an allergy. You're just on a low carb diet. And you're saying you have an allergy because you really want to drive home to your waiter that you don't want any gluten in your meal or whatever. And then the person who actually has a gluten allergy is like, I have a gluten allergy. And now everyone's like, no, you don't. That's not now. And it's the same thing that's happening now with the word trigger, is that trigger is an actual real phenomenon that exists. You know, this is a word that we have, you know, based in studies of PTSD, of post-traumatic stress disorder, that a trigger is a real thing. Absolutely. But it's come to mean so many things that it's kind of getting to the point where we can't use that word anymore without sounding like we're trivializing it, which makes me really angry. Don't mess with my language.
Well, you know, to just even add on top of what you're saying there, like, language is very important. And I forget what the numbers are, but, you know, we used to only communicate through our bodies and through pictures and through stuff like that. So, and I think it was something like 5,000 years later, we finally learned how to like communicate. So
we're still working on it, obviously, which is why we're here.
I'm still learning. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Like, it's an evolutionary process, and I'll admit, like, I still screw up. You know, I still get stuck in my head. I still am like, you know, we were talking today, and I was like, darn, I think I totally got self-righteous there, and that piece is like, great, now that I'm aware that this happened and I know why it happened and I know I had a trigger that had me do that, then you can start changing the patterns in your life, and then you can start showing up and learning how to communicate even better. So it really starts with you and your self-awareness. And so let's jump into this kind of definition. So trauma triggers are simply this: they're reminders of the trauma event. So everybody has their own unique things that trigger them. Triggers can be people, places, or stimulations and situations. They can also be thoughts, emotions, and sensations. So, yes, the idea of like I'm triggered can be so broad, and it can be used for something like a barista spelling your name wrong could actually be like a childhood memory because nobody spelled your name right and you felt like you were unworthy and nobody paid attention to you, and you could lose it. You could spiral out from something like that to something like, you know, something really big where you see like a mom yell at a child and you're like, oh my God, that brought back memories. It's really, what the trigger does is it's anything that brings that traumatic event up. And when I say traumatic event, for me personally, and it's really up to you guys how you want to define it, but the way I define it is it's any event that's happened in your life that has given you a negative belief. So it doesn't mean that it has to be so extreme, like I was beaten, I was raped, I was, you know, kidnapped. Yes, those are absolutely something that would fall into there.
Of course, yeah.
You could have something as a child being told no, or a child feeling like they were ignored, that then becomes also an extremely traumatic event. And so, like for me, like we don't always know what the triggers are. And it could be something like a smell. Like you smell a certain smell, and all of a sudden it brings those memories up. If you think of traumatic events, like it feels like you're in the present moment going through the trauma again. Most of us can't remember what we did yesterday, or we can't remember what we did 2 weeks ago. That's a normal memory, essentially. And so there's nothing attached to it that's going to have it be brought back, unless you're keeping a diary or, you know, there was something specific. When it comes to traumas, what it's done is it's a memory that hasn't been able to be processed, essentially. And so it's really big. Your brain doesn't really know where to put it. And so it's kind of like it's there and it's in the forefront. And so part of what we're doing with the communication is, again, this self-awareness. If I can become aware of what my triggers are, I can be aware of then how my communication can go. So then I can start working through my triggers, so then it doesn't complete this, you know, it doesn't have that cycle going around and around and around again.
Right, so the more self-awareness we can cultivate
Yes.
and understand how the events of our lives have shaped our experience and how our past is shaping our present experience, the more we can really examine where those things are coming from and understand that, you know, one of the things that I've learned within the past year is that there's a difference between a trigger and a crisis. Is that, you know, a crisis is something happening in the present where it's like, I have to deal with this right now. I'm having anxiety for a reason. Something is happening to me right now that I have to deal with. And then there's a trigger where it's like, oh, something is coming up for me that is reminding me of the past, but truthfully, in the present moment, I'm actually safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the key right there, is learning how to recontextualize what's going on while the kind of trigger is going.
Yeah.
And happening.
So what are some of the best strategies for us to be able to do that? So let's say I want to approach this from two different angles in today's show, and I want to talk about what can you do if you are the person who is feeling either triggered, or if you would just want to use the word frazzled or stressed out, you know, because you saw things on the news that are upsetting you, and you know that something is going on in the world that is putting you in a state of mind where you feel awful in general. I want to talk about what can you do if you're that person, and then I want to talk about, you know, a little later on in the show, I want to talk about what can you do if you're the other person who is maybe feeling okay. Maybe you're just at home in the kitchen making dinner, but your partner walks in and they're just, you know, they're in a terrible mood because of something that happened. And what can, in that situation, what can each of those people do to avoid getting into arguments that are going to be a detriment to their relationship? So let's start with, what can you do when you're feeling stressed out? What can you do when you are the person who is having that state of, you know, having your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain designed for peaceful communication, when that shuts down, what can you do to recognize those things and bring yourself back to a safe place?
So I think one of the first things that is really helpful is when you're not in a triggered state already, think about the things that you enjoy and that help bring you to that space of serenity, of peace, of happiness, of joy, and really create a deep list. Because what happens again is when we are in that like stressed out state, we can't think outside of stuff. It's kind of like, what's going on right now? What do I need to do? I need to get away. But if we have something that's written down already, it's something that we've learned already by practicing writing things down to know, when I feel this way, I will go to this notebook that says, take a bubble bath, go to bed, get your nails done, go for a walk. Like, it'll give you a list of things to do that you already know bring you the state of mind that you want to be in. And so that's really one of the first things to do. From there, it's starting to keep track of, what are your triggers? What are the things that you've started to notice? It's like, what are the things, the events, the smells, the sensations, anything, the touches or not touches, like, what are the things in your life that set you off, that get you into the fears and the shames and the guilts and the, like, there's such a long list of vocabulary. Most of us know like 5 words. So I also encourage that. Like, I really encourage, go online, look up an emotions list and start to get really clear on what your actual emotions are, because then you learn how to communicate them better. And then you also know what level you're at when you're triggered. Are you at like, I'm feeling meh? And like, okay, so a meh means that I just need to like go drink a glass of water. But if you're like, I am so angry, I can barely see what's in front of me, then you're like, oh, I'm at like 100 out of 0 to 100. What are the things that help calm me down? And that may be a step-by-step process that slowly brings you down from there. So, it's a lot, and we keep bringing up this word, but it's really about self-awareness. The more you know about yourself, even if it's scary to go there, the better off you are to bring joy, happiness, calm, peace, serenity, freedom, like all of those desirables, all those positives that we keep talking about. It'll actually help you get there. There's also this thing about, in our society, which I think has caused a lot of problems, is this idea of like always being positive. And I think that's a huge detriment to all of us. We are not meant to be positive all the time. Absolutely, yeah. We just aren't. Like, that's total crap.
Well, yeah, and then we shame spiral because there's so much, spiritual propaganda out there saying positive vibes, be positive all the time. And then when we're not measuring up to that, we're like,
I'm bad, I'm wrong,
exactly.
They're not good enough, the world is, chicken little. Like.
Precisely, so you're adding, on top of already feeling blah, you're adding this judgment onto that, like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way.
Yes.
Which takes you,
shoulds is a whole,
exactly,
oh my gosh, we could talk for hours. Love this stuff. Well, so here's the thing, like, we need our negative emotions. Our negative emotions are lessons for us to learn. There is a message our body is giving us when we have these negative emotions. And when we shove them down, I don't care what you believe, at some point it will show up. At some point it will come out, whether it's you're so angry you say things that hurt another person and your soulmate no longer is your soulmate because they're like, you just destroyed me and you couldn't handle yourself.
Yeah.
Or it's, some of the things that we see in the news.
Yeah.
Like, we need to learn how to we need to learn how to like give words to our negative emotions. And call it out, like here's what my body is actually feeling. Like, I'm not my feelings, it's just something that's coming up. So I am feeling this. Doesn't have to mean anything, or it can, and you're like, okay, well, why am I feeling, like, I'm feeling angry. Why am I feeling angry? Like, what's underneath there?
Yeah, and I feel that when we cut ourselves off from our emotions, we're also cutting ourselves off from our wisdom, because our emotions are the thing that point us in the direction of what we want versus what we don't want. So if we're repressing them, we're actually saying, no, I don't want my inner guidance. I don't want the thing that's telling me how to be happy. I remember, I'll never forget, my high school Latin teacher made this amazing analogy about pain. And she said that if you've translated a sentence from Latin to English and it doesn't make sense, if you translated this sentence in Latin and it came out like, the stars are burning in the ground, instead of the sky or whatever. She's like, there's probably a reason for that. And she said that she had had a child who was born with a condition whereby he was unable to feel pain. And you're like, oh, if the first time you think of that, you're like, wow, great, no pain, great life. And she's like, but that person could be walking around on a broken ankle the whole time and not knowing it. And they're not able to give their body what it needs to heal. So if you're feeling pain, whether it's in a conversation, in a relationship, in your body, it's a signal that that's your body's alert system that something is wrong or something is getting lost in translation. And I've never forgotten that, because it always reminds me of as in my work as a relationship coach, and as a dating coach, it's like there's so many times that we try to engage in people and just pretend that everything is okay, because we feel that our emotions, if we were to fully express them, would not be welcomed. So we convince ourselves, in order to play that role, we convince ourselves no, it's like the dog meme with the fire, this is fine, this is okay. But when we do that, we're actually, as I said, cutting ourselves off from that wisdom. And if we were to listen to that pain, it would tell us something is wrong and we need to make a change, because we should be feeling good. You need to take whatever sign, whatever direction the pain is pointing towards that says this is the wrong thing, you flip that arrow the other way and say, well, the opposite of this is probably the right thing. So sitting there and being like, what is making me feel bad? And identifying that and saying, well, probably whatever is going to make me feel good is going to be in the opposite direction from that. And again, that brings it back to self-awareness. So when you're feeling those negative emotions, what are some things you can do in that moment to salvage your conversations or your relationships? And I guess it depends, again, where on that scale from 1 to 100 you are.
Yeah.
But what are some things that you would suggest if you're interacting with, say, whether it's a partner or a friend or a work colleague, if you're feeling that way, what's a good way to check in and say, what is the best thing for me to do right now?
I think it's really about, it's assessing in the moment what it is that you need to decrease the emotion that you're feeling already. And it's typically hard to do because you're in your emotion. And so, yes, that comes with practice. It's a really good question. I would say it's about knowing yourself. So for me, if I'm getting really angry, I would typically let my partner know, I am feeling anger right now, and I know that through my anger, this is what could happen. So I know for me that if I'm feeling that way, I need 24 hours to self-process.
Yeah.
For me, and again, I'm only talking personally, but it took time to really look at things. What do I need to make sure that I don't ruin a relationship that is so important to me? Well, part of that is self-responsibility. I was somehow created this, whether the other person came in and they were angry and then I got triggered, there's still something about me that has created this. So I'm going to take responsibility for doing this. And once I do that, then it's not about the other person, right? Yes, they are the ones that may have brought up emotions, but they didn't make me feel any way. It's I'm feeling this, and what do I need to do to make sure that I'm taken care of and that something doesn't go wrong further in the relationship? And so some people say finish what you're, never go to bed angry and da-da-da-da-da. That goes into the polarization of things. It's a black and white. I don't do well with dealing with it within 24 hours.
Yeah.
We're going to do that. I go into freeze. I'm not going to be able to have a conversation with you. You're going to be right. Everything you say is right, because all I want is for the conversation to be over, and then we move on. And then what that does is that creates resentment.
Of course.
Because I couldn't talk and I was triggered and I just wanted to get everything going.
Yeah. And you didn't actually have the conversation that
Exactly.
that person thought you were having.
Right.
Because you're sitting there agreeing with everything, being like, yes, yeah, it's fine, you know?
Right.
And really it's not. So sometimes it's about walking away and saying, this is an important conversation to have, but I can't have it with you right now.
Yeah.
So we don't have to go to bed angry. We can just table this.
Yes.
We can say, I love you, I care about you, and I want us to be cool, but I can't resolve everything right now in this moment.
Yeah, and oftentimes, again, that's something you want to talk about before you're triggered.
Yes.
So a
Hopefully.
lot of these conversations you want to have before it escalates.
And that's such an important point, because I feel like people get into relationships and it sounds almost crazy to talk about things before they happen. You know, if you, like, what is the last time that you dated someone and said, hey, what are we going to do when we have a fight?
Right.
What are you like when you're angry? You know, because we want to pretend that we're like, because we're dating someone, I'm never angry, I'm perfect all the time, you know?
Right.
And because we want to show that, you know, our best sides to someone. But it's so smart and so mature to actually have that conversation and sit down and be like, hey, when you get angry, what do you tend to need? You know, do you withdraw? Do you attack? Do I need to say, like, whatever you're saying in the next 10 minutes, I just need to not take it personally, you're just going to do your thing, you know? Or do I need to know that if you walk out of the room, I need to understand that you're not abandoning me, you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a huge difference we can talk about, because, of course, you know, we've been talking about what do you do when you're the person who is triggered. But there's also that other side of what do you do when your partner is triggered. And there's so many things that if we don't understand that our partners are in that mental space of you know, whether it's trauma or whether it's, you know, just stress, anxiety, or anger, whatever emotion they're feeling, we don't understand that their behavior toward us might not be personal. And granted, they are still accountable for their behavior. It's not an excuse for anyone to act, certainly not in any abusive manner, or even in a way that's just, you know, mean or
disrespectful.
Yeah, exactly. They're still accountable for controlling themselves, but I think there is a difference between making excuses for someone and contextualizing their behavior.
Yeah.
You know, an excuse says, well, this isn't your fault. You know, you're not taking responsibility for this. You know, you did this because this, and this. Whereas contextualizing is about, well, let's look at all of the circumstances that caused this behavior in you, and then let's look at what we can do should these circumstances arise again to mitigate that reaction. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched upon an important point here. When you're triggered or when you're angry or when you're in any of those kind of negative emotions where your inability to actually contextualize happens, you're in ego, right? So you're going to argue about your point. I'm going to argue about my point, and neither one of us is going to hear each other whatsoever. And so if you can separate, if you can step back from your ego, if you can step back from your emotions, again, this goes into self-awareness. When you realize, oh, I'm angry, I'm gonna push this, and you try to step back, then you can kind of contextualize what else is going on, and you're gonna see, like, okay, so what is this person actually saying? What is the feeling that's coming up for them right now? And what is the need? There's some kind of need that's going on with them that's not getting met.
Yes.
Now I feel like it sounds really simple, and I got this from the nonviolent communication, which there's great things out there. There's great workshops. There's a great book all about nonviolent communication, which I just think is brilliant. But it really talks a lot about, like, if you can stop hearing what people are thinking. It's almost like it doesn't matter what they're thinking. It's what are they feeling and what do they need. Even if they're like, I hate you, you know, you don't do this, you don't do that. It's like, okay, so you feel like my experience of you is that you're angry right now, and the need you want is to feel valued and appreciated for what you do around the house.
Yeah, and you know, we talked about this earlier, and when you said that, it rang so true for me that everyone's statement, no matter what they're saying, it's never exactly about what they're saying. It's
Right.
always about their feelings and their needs. So I could look at you and say, you're a jerk and I hate you, but really what I'm feeling is, I'm feeling anger, or maybe I'm feeling fear. Maybe I'm feeling fear of abandonment, or I'm feeling anger at being disrespected or whatever. And I have a need. Everything that we express in communication is always about the need that we want to get met.
Yes.
Like every single, everything.
It's never
Can
about
I have chicken McNuggets?
Right.
It's about I'm hungry.
It's never about
that's
the
not a
dirty
feeling,
dishes. It's never about not taking out the garbage.
Yeah.
Like, it's not about, like, it's so often, again, because people are not self-aware, it's so often these things will build and build and build and build, and then one day he doesn't take out the freaking garbage, and it's World War III.
Yeah.
And what's really underneath there is like, I need to feel respected. I need to feel like the work that I do around the house is appreciated.
Yeah.
But we've not given people permission to do that. Frankly, our society is seriously lacking in interpersonal, interpersonal relationships and communication skills. So, I'm so glad that you're doing these talks, because there's so much to this. And it can change, and I think it can really make the biggest difference.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've been noticing is, as I've been working with people, whether friends or students, of mine, I've been asking them to look at what their partners are saying to them and break it down. One of of course, as you and I know, there are steps in nonviolent communication which can help you to, if you're the one who is communicating, can help you break down the thing that you wanted to say originally. You can help break that down into the actual feeling and need, so that you're not talking about the dirty dishes anymore, or you're saying, like, I noticed you left the dirty dishes in the sink, and my feeling about that is I feel sad. I feel sad, I feel angry, and my need around that is for you to I have a need for you to acknowledge that our relationship is going to be healthiest if our chores are divided equally. I feel like I'm doing too much or whatever. So there are ways of taking those statements and breaking them down into feelings and needs. But one of the kind of super ninja advanced communication skills is to look at your partner's communication when they say, hey, you left the dirty dishes in the sink and I'm pissed off at you or whatever. And for you to be able to Jedi mind trick whatever they said into the actual feeling and need. And to be like, oh, okay, so I left the dirty dishes in the sink. And because I left the dirty dishes in the sink, now you're feeling angry and sad, and you have a need for mutual respect in the relationship that extends to us divvying up the household chores in a way that's fair. And if you can say that to someone in a relationship, sometimes they're like, yeah, how'd you know? Because it's something that when we learn how to do it, it's really not a very difficult process to learn. It's just so hard to remember when we're in the moment and we're talking to people because we're on edge. Oh my God, my partner is yelling at me. Fight, flight, freeze, faint. Oh my God. So if we can stay and breathe and stay in our bodies, So it does go both ways. You can use that skill for communicating, and you can also use that same breakdown in order to break down what someone else is saying to you and say, this is what I'm getting from this. Is this correct?
Yeah, and a way to think about this, because I know that we're giving you guys a lot of information and we're kind of jumping around all over the place, is our communication. The communication that we have today is habitual. That's it. So that means that we can create a new habit in the way that we're talking and the way that we communicate with other people. It's really not that hard. The beauty of our minds is we come back to this, once we become aware of what's not working, because here's the thing, most of us are doing things and we have no clue that it's actually not working.
Yeah.
Like, we just don't know what we don't know.
That's
and
so
there's a beauty
true.
in that.
Yeah.
And so, I'm giving you all permission out there to, not know what you don't know and not beat yourself up about it. You don't need to. And when you become aware of it, don't beat yourself up about it. Just say, oh, I had no idea. What can I do differently now? And that's how you can then start creating a new habit. Like one of my, I was seeing a therapist a couple years ago. One of the biggest changes she had me do is get rid of my shoulds. We should on ourselves all the time.
We do, it's so true.
And it's destroying us. It's destroying us inside. Like it's eating us alive inside. And then we should all over other people. You should do this, you have to do this, you need to do this, which is so attacking. Like it feels like such attack. So, you know, that's a great place for people to start too. Like, where are you saying should? Where are you saying, what is it? Should, need, have to, must. Notice when you're saying it and self-correct immediately. You should do this. No. What I really mean is it would be great if you did this.
Yeah.
You know, you need to do this. Okay. I don't mean need. What I meant to say is, I would really appreciate it if you did this.
And those shoulds and needs are actually, like, that's where the term nonviolent communication, in my experience, comes from, is that to say, you should do this, you must do this, you need to do this, is actually a form of violence, you know, because it's, even though our words are, even though our, you know, even though our words are not necessarily responsible for another person's actions, we're essentially putting them in a box. We're putting them in a container.
The way that we've been trained how to speak, they actually are.
Oh, interesting. Oh, cool.
So if you think about it, like, I can't remember his name, who does nonviolent. Let's tell them what the author.
Marshall Rosenberg?
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
So many names in my head. He talks about the way in which we communicate either has people go into submission or go into rebellion. That is it. That is what it does. And that's a form of violence. So when you're seeing, like, you see a parent, you must do this. Say you're sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Kids like,
we grow up with that.
Like, I'm sorry. You know. And then they're like, that's not good enough. And then you see the kid like, oh, like they get upset and they start crying. Well, you've just had your child submit to you. And you're now training them to do that. I mean, most of our schooling system, unfortunately, is through submission. Yeah. And then you've got the kids out there that are like, I can't do this. This isn't me. Like, you're making me do things, and, you know. And so there's a whole conversation around, like, becoming aware of, am I making a request of somebody, or am I making a demand? And even if I'm making a request, sometimes because of past experiences that people have had, they might actually hear your request as a demand.
Right.
So there's just, it's amazing. And so, like,
talking is hard.
Baby steps. So we're going to give you some baby steps, and I'm going to let you guys know. I'm going to make sure that either we're going to have a link at the bottom of the page or a website or someplace. We'll make sure that you guys know. I will make sure that some of these worksheets are available to you so you can start doing this. You know, this is about self-responsibility and self-reflection. Brendan Bouchard talks about how self-reflection is where you have your greatest breakthroughs. And those breakthroughs are the things that change your life. They give you the life that you deeply desire and that you deeply want, including intimacy, including happiness, including abundance. And so, so what I'd like to do is give you guys a formulation to start practicing those feeling need things.
Yeah,
feeling need
let's
things.
do that.
Okay, so what they're called I statements. And so it says, when you're angry, frustrated, hurt, or fearful, the words you choose to communicate feelings can either increase or decrease the level of anger and intensity. And so I statements are assertive communication. Now, most of us speak either in passive-aggressive communication, or we speak in aggressive communication, or we speak in a passive way. And so again, that's a whole other thing that we can talk about another day.
Yeah.
But what we want to do is we want to learn how to be assertive. Assertive communications mean that we're speaking to somebody without emotion. Our emotions are not running us. So we're not in reaction, we are in action. We're
That's
moving
an important
forward,
distinction.
We are in the present moment. Whereas, again, if we're in reaction, we're in fight, flight, or freeze, and we are doing things that are not going to serve ourselves and the people that we are around. So what I statements do is they help you express your feelings in a manner that will not provoke a negative response from the person who's listening. And so if you think about the communication that you have with people, often it is, you did this, you did that, da-da-da-da-da, like you're projecting everything onto the other person.
It's all your fault and I'm a perfect
Totally,
angel.
absolutely. And so what does that do? The person goes, whoop, walls up, they're defensive, they're now angry because they're like, I have to defend myself. Like, I didn't actually do this, your perception's wrong, blah, 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 blah. And so the I statement, what it does is it actually has you take responsibility and put it on you to say, this is what's going on for me, and this is the action that had me feel this way. Meaning, if anybody else did it, I would feel the same way. So yes, you may have been the one that did this, but if anybody else had done it, I would have felt the same thing.
Right, it's not personal. Exactly,
and that's really the importance of learning to take our ego out of these things, and so that we can just kind of see things as just how they are. So it'll take practice. So be patient with yourself. I'm still working on it. I've been doing this for like 3 years. So there's 5 basic parts. So it starts with I feel, which is 1 and 2. So I allows you to take ownership of the communication. So it is yours. I. Then you do a feeling. So this is the emotion that you're feeling, not your thought. So this is really key. And now that I'm going to point this out, I think a lot of you are probably going to have some ahas. So very often what we'll do is we'll say, I feel this way, and we'll actually do a thought. So I feel like you're not listening to me. I feel
that's
like
such a popular one. We hear that all the time.
We hear that all the time.
And and there's like, I've noticed this pattern happen where people think that they're talking in I feel statements just because they say I feel. They're like, I feel like you're a jerk.
Totally. You're like, what?
It's like, no, that's not. Just because you put I feel in front of your accusation doesn't actually make it a positive way of communicating. Yeah.
Well, my favorite is when I'm with my clients, they're like, I feel, and this is, and they're doing this. And I'm like, is that a feeling or a thought?
Yeah.
And now there's some times when we have feelings, like we think abandonment's a feeling, we think like, what were some of the other ones that I heard today? But
hurt, like I feel hurt. Well, hurt is actually an action.
That can be an emotion. Like,
okay.
So if you go online, I highly recommend go online and then type in like emotions list, and you'll be surprised by some of the emotions. Like meh is really considered an emotion.
Yeah.
I was like, that's brilliant. I'm using it all the time because that's how I feel sometimes.
Yeah.
If you can start to actually learn what the feelings are, because anger is, what does that mean?
Right.
There's a whole spectrum of anger, and you see
absolutely.
if you go on the emotions list, you'll actually learn how to verbalize what you really feel. And that's where a lot of people have problems with saying I feel, because they're like, I don't actually know what I feel.
Yeah.
So I feel this way, and oftentimes, it's bringing it to the other person because that's like the need. They kind of skip over, like there's something missing there. So the reminder is, when you do an I feel, have an actual feeling. I feel angry, I feel hurt, I feel shame, I feel joy. You could this doesn't have to be a negative thing, but have there be a feeling in there, because what that does is that creates intimacy too. So that allows your partner to be like, oh, I know that feeling. It's empathy as well. That's a big key in communication. And a lot of the stuff that you were talking about before, like if you can step back and you can hear your partner, put yourself in their shoes and kind of think a little empathetically. Like, what would I want to hear in this moment?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's some of that in here too. So that automatically kind of grabs people in. So I feel, and then the third step is when. So here you name the event or the behavior that has triggered you. So, and another key here is if you can not use you. So if you can avoid using you, because you creates that automatic like,
right,
like I have to defend myself.
Right, exactly. It's about the person rather than the action.
Right, and then you're blaming them instead of taking responsibility. It's a manipulation tool, so it's being aware of that. And again, give yourself permission to practice this, right? So like you can pre-think of situations where you'll use these. The next part, so part 4, is because. So this is name the effect the event or behavior has had on you. And the 5th one is I'd appreciate it if, or I'd like or prefer it if. So what this does is it allows you to set a boundary, and it gives you and the other person a solution to rectify what has happened. So, for example.
So maybe we could do an example. Maybe we can go back to the dirty dishes.
Okay.
And like the wrong way
That's exactly
would be like,
what's right here.
Oh, look at that. It's so perfect.
So here's
the
an
wrong
example.
way would be like coming home and I'd be like,
You
didn't do the
again."
dishes. You're a jerk. Yeah.
We're done.
And yeah,
I
forget
can't
it.
do this anymore.
Door slam, done.
Yeah. So the way to do an I statement would be, I feel resentful, disrespected, and hurt when the dirty dishes are left in the sink because it feels like they're being left for me to clean up. I'd appreciate it if dirty dishes were put in the dishwasher after eating.
Oh, that's so much better. And who's going to not put their dirty dishes in the dishwasher?
Well, they may still not do that,
which is so
right?
simple to avoid hurting their partner. Well, at that point, I guess you have to say, like, if your ability and your right to put the dirty dishes in the sink is more important to you than my feelings, then maybe we shouldn't be in a relationship with each other.
Well, I mean,
but at least you can, at that point, you can approach it from a place of like actually evaluating the
Right.
actions that are happening, not from feeling angry and feeling all these, the emotions.
And there's a thing too, like you're setting a boundary and your partner has free will and choice, and so they can accept the boundary or not.
Yeah.
What the outcome and the goal of learning this nonviolent communication and just learning communication skills is, how do you create every conversation to have a win-win? How can both our needs be met? Because that's actually possible. Like everyone's needs could actually get met. It just may need to be shifted, not compromised, but shifted around a little bit.
Sure.
So.
And yeah, I feel like so many people go into relationships thinking that they're a zero-sum game, and especially given the kind of manipulation that is out there in the relationship sphere, which, I mean, granted, as you know, like as most people who are familiar with my work know, I have a background in pickup artistry, and I learned that so that I could acquire social skills, to be able to talk to people in any situation, to create, to facilitate connection. But certainly I am very, very aware of all the manipulation that is out there, and so, and when we do that, it's like we have this layer on top, that's hiding that real true intimacy. So it is about dropping into your experience and taking responsibility for the things that you feel, and creating and understanding that it's not about that. It can be about a win-win. It's not about this like, well, I have to do something to get you to give it into me, and then I've won, and I don't care if you've, I don't care how you feel about it. I just want what I want. Yeah, precisely. And I think just knowing that it's possible to go into our relationships, to go into our conversations with this attitude of, how can we both be happy about this? Like, do you realize how many relationships out there would be wildly successful if both people just went into them saying, how can we both be happy? And that's the common denominator that I notice in all of those successful relationships that I see around me, is that both people want both people to be happy.
Sure. And that's really important. And then what that goes down to is, what is your definition of happiness?
Yeah.
Because your definition of happiness and my definition of happiness could be two different things. I was doing a continuing education, and I wish I could remember who it was that taught this. And they were saying the three most important things to have a relationship work are communication, passion, and safety. And if you don't have one or any combination of those three things, it's basically not going to work out.
Yeah.
And what they mean by that is, you've got to determine, what is your communication, what is your passion, what does safety look like for you? And then you need to find out what your partner's is.
Yeah.
Because like, what safety means for me in a relationship could be very different from you. But because our egos are there, we often think that like our partner should be able to read our mind and know how I need to feel safe in a relationship. And we forget to tell them, and then it's like, well, I don't feel safe in the relationship. And they're like, but I'm your protector and I'm big and strong. And what you really may need is you're like, I need you to defend me.
Yeah. And I think that's so key to understanding the nature of relationships is that I think we really reach another level when we understand that our view of the world is not everyone else's view of the world. And the things that we need are not necessarily the things that they need. It's kind of like the little kid who buys his mother a baseball for her birthday because he's like, I like baseball, so she's going to want one too. To understand that the way that you want to receive love may not be the same way that your partner wants to receive love. And that's fine. You just need to sit down and talk with one another about those needs and work out how you can give to each other in a way that is satisfying for both people.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to offer 2 resources for people on helping them go for those kind of communications. So again, this goes back to like most of us really don't know how to communicate. Like we're all trying, bless our hearts, we are trying our damnedest to like communicate with others, and we really want to. I mean, humans want love and they want to feel like they belong. That is really the simplest thing. Like if you look at anybody and what they're trying to do, they're just trying to feel loved and they're trying to feel like they belong somewhere. It's who we are as humans. And so one of the resources I want to give you guys is the 5 languages of love.
Yeah.
So great. Google it. There's books out there.
You can take a quiz on the website. I think it's like 5lovelanguages.com, and there's a quiz right on the homepage. It's terrific.
Yeah, and so what you'll learn from that is you'll learn what is your love language, and your partner can take it and you can learn what theirs are. Because oftentimes we are not in relationship with the person that is the same thing as us, right?
Absolutely.
So I could be gifts. You could be acts of service, and we could not be meeting each other's needs whatsoever. You might think that gifts are a waste of money, they may not mean anything, why would I buy you anything? And if that's your love language, like how that would hurt so much, because you're like, they never tell me, they never show me that they're thinking of me. Right? And so, but then your partner might be doing these acts of service. They're like, I clean the house and I do the dishes and I do the yard work and I let you use the car. And you're like, oh, great. So what?
And what is the second resource too? Because I know that we're almost we're almost at the point where we need to wrap up.
A dear friend of both of ours, Jaya Ma, has come up with
she's wonderful.
Yeah, so it's I think it's the
5 erotic blueprints.
Yeah, if you Google if you Google the erotic blueprints, you'll learn what your sexual language is. And that's really important. So it's, it'll give you another test that you can take, and then you can start to learn what's your sexual language with your partner. I mean, we know in relationships, the 2 biggest things are finance and sex. Like that's why people, so.
Sure, yeah.
So let's get sex on board.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. And this has been immensely helpful. I know there's, we put a lot of information out into this episode, but luckily it's going to be archived here on droneboxlabs.com, and so people can go back and you can watch it again. You can take notes, and we are going to be doing this series on a monthly basis, and I'm going to be interviewing a new and different awesome expert every time. Today's expert has been Kayce Neill, and where can everyone find you?
So I'm building a website right now with my business partner. And if you need to get in touch or want to get in touch with me, you can email me at radiantwomansociety@gmail.com.
Amazing. And you offer personalized coaching to people. If they came to you and said, I'm having the same fight in my relationship over and over and over, can I please get your advice? Is that something that you could help people with?
Yeah, my business partner and I, we work with women. She typically works with men, but we absolutely welcome men in. I've worked with men all over the place. And we'll be creating some programs on this. We'll be creating some programs around how to deal with boundaries, how to have assertive communication. Our big key is giving women the ability to feel free and expressing themselves fully.
Oh, wonderful. And that's obviously our missions on Earth are quite well aligned, and I'm so glad you were able to join us today. Thank you all again for joining us today. Please stay tuned, because we've got lots of more really fun shows coming up in the coming months, and go out and talk peacefully.
black masses coming down, factories ablazing and violence abound. Man maketh machine, he wrote, machine will breaketh man. A tale as old as Moses and a force as old as sand. Come all you young fellers now and hear what I will say. I don't speak of prophecy, don't speak of judgment day. What we do see coming, we have seen it come before.